Hello and welcome to the show. I'm sitting here with Mr. David Bedein. He's the head of the news agency. What do you call your?
Well, I have two investigative offices. One is the Israel Resource News Agency, and the second is the Center for Near East Policy Research. One does news reporting, the other does news investigations.
So, David? What would you like to talk about today?
Well, the focus of our work is the issue of the Arab refugees from 1948 who are still in refugee camps 70 years later. There was a Swedish diplomat by the name of Count Vogt Bernadotte who was involved in UN mediation. He was very upset by the law of return that the Knesset enacted as its first
Jews.
law. Right. So he decided to push the right of return for all the Arabs who left in the war in the 1948, during the 1948 war, to be able to enable them to have the right to go back to where they came from in 48. And so, ironically, people were put in, the Arabs, about 500,000 or so, were put into temporary refugee camps, 59 temporary refugee camps. And guess what?
Around Israel.
Right, Israel, in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria. And guess what? They're still there. And that's
70 years after.
70 years later, correct. They're still there, and the what I've been learning about over the years and investigating is their school system, where the basis of the school system is right of return by force of arms. Now, this is not a local issue, and this is not even an Israel-Arab issue. The biggest nations in Western Europe, including Sweden, finance that system. Sweden gives the equivalent of $62 million each year to keep people in refugee camps under the false pretenses of the right of return. Not to West Bank and Gaza, but to the villages they came from in 48, which are now Haifa, Tel Aviv, Netanya, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Beersheba, whatever. And that's a big problem because the children grow up saying the only thing they live for is to go back to their homes in 48 and to kill the Jews who live there.
And they still carry the key.
Oh, absolutely. They carry the key, their identification cards, pictures, drawings, anything that they can imagine they can get their hands on.
Is the Palestinians is the only refugee in the world that inherit their refugee status from their parents and grandparents?
Well, there are some actually in other countries that do, but none of them, no refugee agents community in the world believes they have the intrinsic right of return. Nobody. That's what's new about it, and it's supported universally all around the world. And we're talking about a $1.2 billion budget to keep people in refugee camps, in the indignity of refugee camps, waiting to go back to where they came from.
Is that you're talking about the UNRWA?
Yeah, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, financed by 68 nations. Sweden is the number 5 nation at giving $62 million a year. And they're in there under false pretenses, not just giving them services, but indoctrinating them, brainwashing them that they have to go back to where they came from. That's their whole purpose in life.
Is that true that the total budget of all refugees all over the world, it's less than UNRWA's refugees budget?
No, let's put it this way: the per capita amount that they get is much more. And there's 5,000, or actually 6,000 workers for UNHCR. That's the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, working with refugees around the world. And with UNRWA, you have 30,000 people working with them, and they're all local Arabs, who and not only are they local Arabs, but they're often members of terrorist organizations.
What do you do for that to prevent all this
it's not
false information?
The best thing we can do is to suggest to the donor countries to look again at where your money is going. Instead of, look, the money is already allocated, it's not going to stop. $1 billion doesn't stop so fast. But if you're giving money, the schools, you have to take the school books out which indoctrinate children to jihad. We purchased all the school books. You can take a look at them. You can you talk to our researchers. They'll talk to you about what's there, our Arab and Jewish researchers. Again, delete books that call for war, because that's not what the United Nations... School books. The United Nations should not be pushing that. Number 2, teachers who are members of terrorist organizations should be removed. 3, there's also a war curriculum. There's war classes in the schools where the children go through all kinds of exercises, how we're going to make war. 4, you have there's a singer. The United Nations, the UNRWA hired a youth idol to go around the world. His name is Mohammed Asaf, and sing songs of murdering Jews. 5, you have to do everything possible to have, how shall we say, oversight of the money coming in. And number 6, there's no reason in the world why people have to be restrained and kept in these camps. Encourage them to go elsewhere. Right now, UNRWA doesn't. UNRWA wants them to stay where they are until a political solution will happen. Well, there will not be a political solution. So help people get out of there. And these are intelligent people with high-level education. Every UNRWA child has at least a 10th grade education, if not more, and therefore they're welcome as workers abroad because they're intelligent. They can do all kinds of things. And I know that there's 17 countries. When we had a problem a few years ago with the one UNRWA camp in Iraq, and they had to be, after the fall of Saddam Hussein, they were sent around the country, around the world. There were 17 nations that received UNRWA residents.
Which are Palestinians.
Yeah, these are Palestinian Arabs, sure, absolutely. But
Yeah,
17
they've
nations,
been living 50 years in Iraq. 70 years.
70 years in these camps, correct. Since 1949. And this is the 1948, excuse me. And this is the issue. To keep people in refugee camps, and I'm a social worker by profession, and I don't like to see many people manipulated for political purposes. So saying to someone that you have to stay in
Misery.
in the indignity of a refugee camp because of an ideology and a goal which can't be achieved, there's something wrong with that. Now, yesterday, several thousand children marched from their UNRWA refugee camps towards the Gaza border, saying we want our homes back from '48. They want to go into the Negev and to go to Ashkelon, Ashdod, Beersheba. They were stopped. But my fear is, we've been filming these children going through military training with real guns. You can see that on our website. My fear is that they're going to come there with the guns that they have at home, children, approaching the border, and when that happens, many of them will die.
Do you have any sort of proof that the books of UNRWA you're talking about are this?
Well, what we did was we hired 4 researchers, 2 Arab researchers and 2 Jewish researchers to go through the books. We first of all bought all the books. I got permission to buy the books from Yasser Arafat back in 20 years ago, and he arranged for us to have a relationship with the Ministry of Education. The Palestinian Authority Ministry of Education supplies the books to UNRWA, and we got all of them. We checked it against the internet to make sure that we have
the right books.
Absolutely. And what we've seen in the last 2 years in the latest books, it's no longer incitement, it's now indoctrination, now brainwashing. There's no more Israel. You're not fighting Israel, you're fighting the Zionist occupation, the Zionist conquest. Every place in the land of Israel, whether it's inside the West Bank or not inside, whether it's
occupied.
It's conquered. Conquered, and the people have to be expelled. In one of the school books, one of the most amazing things we found in a 3rd grade school book, a teacher asked the class, "Well, what do we do with the 6 million Zionists who are here, and who won't leave?" And the answer was, "We have to exterminate them." That was a very clear answer.
And you have that on those books and all that.
All the books are mounted on our website. All 250 pages, very clearly. There, IsraelBehindTheNews.com. You can see it very clearly. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. If there was a peace curriculum, we would publish it tomorrow morning, but it doesn't exist. Now, in the newest school books, for the first time, there's a page in honor of peace. Well, it doesn't, but it's put in the middle of everything. There's no explanation of what that's supposed to be, but a page in honor of peace. Well, if you have peace and you have at the same time the children being trained for war, there's a certain contradiction there.
Okay, this thing about 2-state solution. For the Palestinians and for the books, there's one state and call it Palestine.
That's correct.
With no Jews.
That's correct.
That's Judenrein.
That's right. And that perhaps that's the reason why Germany has tripled their contribution to UNRWA, because they know something about the Judenrein philosophy.
What do we do about that?
We have the most important thing is the dialogue with the donor nations. I do not believe that the parliament of any Western donor nation, whether it's Germany or Sweden or England, that they have made a decision to teach the children to make war on the Jews. I don't believe that. They're being told by UNRWA, oh, it's all for peace, everything's fine. I've seen the memos. A memo we got almost the identical email from 7 foreign ministries. Oh, we know that UNRWA is making school books for peace. Well, we prove that they're not.
Can you do that?
Absolutely. By just opening the books. And by opening up the books, you see exactly what's there. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. The school books for UNRWA are school books for war. And now the interesting thing is that I visited the United Nations the first time in 1960 when I was 10 years old, and there's a big sign at the United Nations, peace starts here. That's one of the themes of the United Nations. Well, how can you have a United Nations agency where it's not peace starts here, but war begins here? There's something wrong here. Now, the United Nations doesn't give any money to UNRWA. They give for the public relations. It's the donor countries that do. And there's no aspect of the United Nations that overlooks, that oversees the UNRWA curriculum.
What do they do with the money?
No, there is none. As we see, what's most interesting at a time when President Trump announced that 3%, that he would cut down 3% of the UNRWA budget. 3%. We're talking about 3% of $1.2 billion, and in other words, $65 million. That's 3%. There was the UNRWA public relations people have been putting out these alarming memos. Starvation. We have no food. We have no medical services. Everything is falling apart because of a 3% cut. Well, I traced it to see if I take a look at all of the allocations. There has been at least $300 million of food and medical supplies that have reached Gaza in the last 2 months. So how can they say that? Well, on the other hand, when you have journalists who don't follow through, and it looks really good when you have pictures of children who are starving, it's good.
But where are they, these children?
The children walk over. They take the children in front of the cameras, and the children say, "I have nothing to eat." I think the most important gesture that the world should give UNRWA is an Oscar at the Academy Awards. The Academy Awards in Los Angeles this year, there should be the Oscar for Best Supporting Lie.
The thing is, with what we learned, when Arafat was talking to the West, he was saying something, and then when he was talking to his own people, he was saying something.
Right.
Totally different. Abbas was doing the same thing, and it seems like UNRWA is doing the same thing to get the donor countries to donate money.
Exactly. People don't do their homework. And by the way, I must say, to his credit, Abbas says the same thing says the same thing also in Arabic and in English. People don't follow what he says. That's all. He says we're going to have a peace conference which is also based on right of return. In other words, there will be 2 states. One state of Israel, which will be dominantly Arab, and the other, which is Palestine, which is dominantly Arab. What are we talking about here? He doesn't mince words into what he's talking about. There was a great film called The Blues Brothers, and they went to get something to eat, and they hear the music, and they said, "What kind of music do you have?" "We have 2 kinds, classic and Western." Country and Western. Country and Western. Let me say that again. The Blues Brothers, they say they hear there's 2 kinds of music, country and Western. It's the same thing. Come on.
So, if these countries, the donating country, see all your things that they had with these researchers and all that,
they won't look at it.
They won't look at it.
Nope. I just found out something today. There is an UNRWA support conference happening in Washington very soon. And the woman who is convening the UNRWA support conference is a veteran of the United States State Department who is supposed to oversee everything coming into UNRWA. Now she's being paid by UNRWA to promote UNRWA. How interesting. Fascinating. And that's what goes on here.
Why won't they listen?
Ask them. I think you should ask. It's very important to ask why. First of all, of course, it's more convenient to have, for the Universal Studios of the world, have groups of people who are refugees and who need $1 billion. But I think if you were to ask the representatives of the donor nations, why aren't you asking for a change in your school books? Why aren't you asking for the removal of terrorists? Why aren't you having oversight and transparency? Why aren't you firing the schools, the singer for UNRWA who promotes war? Why aren't you allowing people from UNRWA to leave, to make better lives for themselves? Ask them. I think it's very important. Generally, they don't like to answer questions.
This year, we're going to have an election in Sweden. And if we show the people where the tax money goes, those $63 million,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's a lot of money for Sweden now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can't you do something about like showing that to those people?
Of course we can. So I think that a independent Swedish agency should fund our work, give money for our cameras to go and find out exactly what's going on. And we can do, there's no problem filming. It's easy to film everything coming in. It's easy to do a graph to see how countries are giving the same money for the same projects and how money is disappearing. And there's enough Arab social workers and Arab teachers and Arab nurses who will talk about how the medical equipment that comes to UNRWA is being stolen.
It's a corruption.
Corruption is a mild word. We're talking massive theft. With 68 nations. 68 nations were complicit.
Is it 68 nations that donate to
that's right.
UNRWA?
Uh-huh.
So why are they complaining about Donald Trump's 3%?
Because they're not saying 3%. They're saying he's stopped all the money. They don't say 3%. If they said 3%, people would laugh at them.
Is it 3%?
It's exactly 3%. That's exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about 3%, holding back. He's not even talking about cutting it. Holding it back until things get reformed. We've suggested something called the UNRWA Reform Initiative, which I just mentioned now. The issues that have to be done. But he cuts 3%, and all of a sudden they say we have no food. Excuse me? It's an insult to the intelligence of the viewing audience to make such a claim. And as you learn more from the other experts on the Palestinian Authority, you're going to find out that the fact that they have used the Palestinian Authority curriculum may mean that they're violating principles, the United Nations principles.
Maybe.
Well, let's put it this way. There was an Arab university that created called Berzeit University, created a curriculum for peace.
Is that you're talking about Berzeit?
Berzeit. I went to there, and then here's the curriculum, except it was vetoed by the Palestinian Authority and by UNRWA. However, UNRWA and the Palestinian Authority will show everybody that curriculum and say, look at the curriculum for peace. They forget to mention that it was vetoed. It's just an error. In my business, you get to understand what happens when people lie through their teeth. I'm a social worker by profession. Part of my work is always dealing with people who are pathological liars, but they do so with a big smile, and they do so in business sense, and working for major non-government organizations. The fact that people are saying that there's no food in Gaza and no money in Gaza when there's 108 organizations that give out $700 million worth of aid to the people in Gaza. And 81% of the people in Gaza, the Arabs in Gaza, live in refugee camps under what premise? The premise of the right of return. And they look at our houses that haven't been repaired. Why aren't they being repaired? Because they don't want them to be repaired, because from their point of view, their houses are waiting for them in Ashkelon, Ashdod, Beersheba, Yaffo. That's very clear. That's what they're taught. And they're not only taught, see, it used to be a joke. I've been working as a journalist and as a social worker. I've been working on this for 40 years. 30 years ago, when I began to professionally work on this issue, I walked into a refugee camp not far from Jerusalem, and I walked up to some children. Where are you from? They said, we're from Jaffa. The same today, 30 years later, their children will say we're from Jaffa, and we're going to kill everybody there. And there's not a smile on their face. They're not joking. Before it was kind of a joke. It's not a joke now.
So this incident that happened a few weeks ago outside Jerusalem somewhere when a rabbi was stabbed to death
Yes.
by a Israeli Arab.
No, he was a regular Arab. Oh, well, there's two rabbis who were murdered.
Yeah.
One by an Israeli Arab, one by a local Arab. Yes, go ahead.
But the Israeli Arab, he grew up in Jaffa
That's correct.
with his mother from Haifa.
Right, but he has that ideology ingrained in him, indoctrinated into him, that if you see a Jew, you have to kill him. And what's most important is that the Palestinian Authority has created an incentive system. They will pay you for any Jew that you kill, and you'll get money for the rest of your life.
It's a
for
fun.
for your family. And by the way, if that's not a war crime, what is? Imagine if the head of Israel, the prime minister or the president of Israel, were to say, "We're going to pay anyone who kills an Arab terrorist." Tomorrow morning there would be an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Here, well, we'll take some tax benefits away from you. People here get used to watching a crime as it's being created. We're talking about the first entity ever that will pay people to kill Jews. The Nazis didn't have that. It was part of the if you were a soldier, yes. But the Nazis never had an incentive system for killing Jews. Come back, show me you kill 50 Jews, and this is how much money you get. It didn't exist. This is new, a new system for paying people to kill Jews, and people got used to it. In the word in English, they got inured to it. They got trained in their minds that this is what happens. This is what happened 25 years after what they call the Oslo peace process.
So, in fact, you can do that. If my family have economical problem,
Sure, you can wake up. You can
wake up in the morning.
And then see, I'm going to help my parents build a bigger house.
And I go and kill 2 Jews, and I get.
Yeah, sure. That's right. And we had a friend who was not far from here. He was getting off the bus, and as he crossed the street, an Arab ran him over, and ran over two Jews, and he was caught. He was beaten, but he wasn't killed, and he's in jail now. And his family has already been able to build a second part of their house. They got the compensation from the Palestinian Authority because he injured 2 Jews, and he'll getting 15 years in jail or something. And in those 15 years, there's going to be money in the bank for him. So when he comes out, he'll be a wealthy guy. A great investment. He's 17.
Terrible.
He's a 15-year-old now. When he's 32, he comes out of jail after serving 15 years for running over 2 Jews, and the money's waiting for him.
Is it different amount of money they get if you kill a Jew
absolutely.
or you?
Oh, absolutely. You get much more. Sure.
If you kill a Jew.
Yeah, much more. And if you have the family plan, there was a man an Arab who killed 3 people in a Jewish family, and he was sentenced to three life sentences last week, and now he's getting 3 subsidies for the rest of his life, $1,000 a month for each person they killed for the rest of his life. And that money, since he would be getting out of jail so fast, goes to his family. So his family is doing very well.
So they get like $3,000 per person they kill for the rest of their life.
That's right.
Where this money comes from?
The money comes from the Palestinian Ministry of Finance, and that money comes from the donor nations who are giving to poor Palestinian Arabs.
It's UNRWA money too? Or?
No, it's Palestinian Authority money. It could be UNRWA money, but we don't know about that. At this point, it's Palestinian Authority money that comes from humanitarian funds that are donated by the donor countries, such as Sweden.
Such as Sweden?
Sure, of course.
So we're paying taxes in Sweden, so Sweden can donate money to people who sit in jail, have been killing Jews, and their family building 2nd floor, 3rd floor.
Right. But the best case scenario is if they wound the Jew, and because if he's in jail for the rest of his life, he may not get out of jail. But a person who's just maimed and crippled 2 Jews, he is the best possible arrangement. He goes. I'm going to repeat it. 17 years old. He goes into jail, and he knows that when he's 32 and he gets out and going to make a life for himself, he has all that money waiting for him. in escrow, waiting. And meanwhile, the family has been also awarded.
And if a terrorist killed a Jew and being killed throughout the attack and all that, what happened to that? His family?
The family is paid.
Oh, they pay for him?
Sure.
If he's dead or alive?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Bedein, what's the agenda of the Swedish Parliament doing this, like recognize Palestine and doing a lot one-sided critic of the conflict Palestine-Israel?
First of all, the reason Sweden is involved in this for good reasons. Sweden wants to see peace in the Middle East. That's a good thing. Now, what Sweden should do is to invite our experts to come to Sweden to translate the school books into Swedish and to show the films of the schools and the films of the people who are getting the aid. Sweden was the first nation to recognize the Hamas regime in Gaza. So we've been filming the Hamas regime in Gaza for years, actually for 20 years. And the people who speak to us on behalf of Hamas in Gaza speak very openly that their purpose is to wipe out the Jews. I do not believe that Sweden knows this, because these are, on a personal basis, they're charming. I sit with them over coffee. They're sweet people. They're family people. They're religious people. You know, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe that a person who's sitting with you in a coffee shop in his office is as vicious as he is. So you bring it to. We have we have on tape, on video, a Hamas official praising UNRWA for allowing them to teach the children how to kill. Now, it's very easy to bring it over there. We just have to have the people have the willingness and the budget to do so. And again, if we find a peace curriculum tomorrow morning, we'll publicize it. But we don't.
There isn't any.
It doesn't exist. But in the public relations firm, what did UNRWA do? UNRWA just hired a very high-power public relations firm in New York to make everyone believe that UNRWA, they want peace. They're just a normal agency, and they're not causing any trouble. And I just saw a 5-minute clip on a very prominent American television program. The workers of UNRWA are dedicated. The people are dedicated. Everything is okay. There's no problems with UNRWA. Just the Israelis who have an army there. So they won't show the films of the children with guns. We can show that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bedein.
Well, Mr. Bedein's in heaven. I'm here. I'm David.
لأنه نعمل حرب إنه نفرجن اليهود إنه إحنا
عن طريق المقاومة في عمليات الطعن والدعس والطخ ورمي الحجارة.
عمليات الدعس وعمليات الطعن.
إذا بدك بطلع بستشهد عادي. أنا إن شاء الله أساعد الشباب وإن شاء الله أصير مقاوم بالمستقبل مع الدولة الإسلامية.
فإن الجنود الأشداء قادمون بإذن الله عز وجل، سوف يرونه في حيفا وتل أبيب وكل مكان.
في عمليات كشفية جهادية حركية على تدريب السلاح البسيط الخفيف لنعدهم للمستقبل لكل النواحي.
سيكون في هناك شيء جديد يعني يكسبه هذا المشروع، لنصل إلى مرحلة أن يكون جميع أبنائنا وجميع شبابنا شباب يعني قد محونا الأمية على السلاح إن شاء الله.
أعمل عمليات، أطلع أستشهد، أعمل أعيش في ضلال الأقصى، ويا ريت أنا أستشهد.
Hello teacher, tell me what's my lesson. Look right through me, and I find it kind of funny, find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. The people run in circles, it's a very, very bad.